Thanks a lot. All right, I took my speaker badge off. Hopefully you guys realize I'm the guy speaking then. I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. I know this, I thought 9 o'clock would be a bad time speaking, but we have a lot of coaches here. I appreciate you guys sticking around, and I'm sure your athletes will. If you can leave with one thing that's going to help reduce injuries for your athletes, then you're going to do a really good job, and I really applaud you guys for sticking around and seeing if there's at least one thing you guys can take from what I'm saying. So how many more games would you win if you came into the season and your athletes were as strong as they possibly could be and actually could use that strength? I'm going to combine both sports performance training and injury reduction in this talk because I think they go hand in hand. What if each player started the season at 100%? That means every player on your team was as strong and as injury-free as possible before your season started. And the number of sprains, strains, and pulls could be reduced during the season from your off-season training system. When that comes into play, how many parents and how many athletes are going to be happier because you took the time to put a good off-season training program together? Your off-season training program should really improve the sports performance of your athletes. It should focus on reducing injuries, keep the athletes really interested in lifting, and then be easy to implement, but at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice effectiveness for ease of use. Today's plan on annoying a little bit of just about everybody in the room. I'm going to say something that's going to be a little bit controversial to just about everybody sitting here. I'm going to have a quick discussion about why there's so many injuries in football today. Give you a list of 10 things that you can include in your training program, things that should be in your off-season training program. Discuss workout progressions that you probably are missing, and then finally give you 21 things that you can actually go back and do. You can pick and choose from them, implement all 21. Like they said when I was being introduced, my name is Nick Osborne. I've been in the business for over 21 years, both on the fitness side and the sports performance side. I've been a strength coach for the Ohio State University and a couple other colleges as a strength specialist. So they bring me in, help set up a program, and I work with them during the off season. I coached the only World's Strongest Man winner from the United States in the last 30 years. You guys might know Phil Pfister if you've ever watched it on TV. And I own Built Solid Training Systems, a sports performance place here in Columbus, and a couple other things. So let's get into why you guys are really here, because I've got about 55, 60 minutes worth of information. I got 50 minutes to get it out. So why are injuries so prevalent in today's sport of football? One, lack of integrated strength. Strength is needed in football regardless of what position you're playing. You need to be able to survive collisions, and if you're competing against somebody who's stronger than you, the person who's weaker tends to have a greater chance of being injured. Two-dimensional strength. Your lifting in the off season goes up and down, but your sport is played forward and back, side to side. Imbalanced muscles. Now most coaches, when you say that, think left hand, right hand. That to a degree is true, but you also got to look at my pushing muscles versus my pulling muscles. And oftentimes those are completely out of whack. We have athletes that can bench 400 pounds for reps, cannot do 2 body weight pull-ups correctly. And that's going to cause a lot of problems in the shoulders, lower back, and hips. Lack of proper joint mobility. There are certain joints that are supposed to be mobile. They're supposed to move in 3 dimensions, but because of mistraining and not really focusing on proper range of motion, they don't work correctly, which causes problems in the joint above or below. On the flip side, there are some joints that are supposed to be stable, that are not supposed to move in any direction but one. Think of your knee, think of your elbow. But because of the other joints that are not moving correctly, we put undue stress on joints that are not supposed to move the way that we're trying to get them to move. Improper conditioning, and we're going to elaborate a little bit more on all of these, but if we have our athletes training in a way that really doesn't lend itself to the sport that we're playing, they tend to be more fatigued, and anytime you have a fatigued athlete, you're having an athlete that's going to probably get injured, or at least set up to be potentially injured. And then again, unprepared for movements and positions you find yourself on the field. So what I mean by this is you're setting up your training program and you're not training your athletes to be athletic, you're actually training them to be unathletic. And if you think about it, that makes as much sense as putting them through a basketball training program to make them better at football. 4 examples of improper training of muscles, because we don't think of the body the way that the current science is showing how the body really moves and supports itself. The first muscle group that we usually train wrong is the hamstrings. They're neglected in most training programs, or they focus on bending the knee. And the reason why is because when they did research about 30 years ago, they would pass an electrical current through the hamstrings and find out what happens, and it flexed the knee. The problem is that's not how the hamstrings really work in three-dimensional space and while an athlete's standing up fighting gravity. The first thing that they do is they stabilize the pelvis. And this is the reason why you end up with high hamstring pulls. We took the Ohio State field hockey team. They had at least an injury rate of 12% of the team would end up with hamstring pulls sometime during the season. Training the hamstrings correctly dropped that to 0. So that's some of the things that you can do with training the hamstrings correctly. So they stabilize the pelvis. They're the secondary mover in hip extension, so your squats or your power movements. They're the secondary mover of standing up or exploding. And knee stabilization. The third job of the hamstrings, all 4 of them, is to stabilize the knee in three-dimensional space. 4th on the list is bend the knee. So when you don't train the hamstrings correctly, you end up with hamstring strains, obviously, lower back problems, knee pain, possible knee injuries, and then adductor or groin pulls also. So the hamstrings trained correctly will reduce a lot of the injuries that you guys are currently experiencing with your athletes. Next is the abs. Most of the time we train our abs in sit-up position, doing some sort of weighted sit-up. But the problem with that is the ab is 4 layers. So we don't just look at one column. There's 4 layers of muscles in the abdominal or the core region. Now when I start talking about core, people think about fitness and all the goofy things that you can do with functional training, and I still consider myself a functional training coach. But we look at the core to do the job it's supposed to do. Stabilize the lumbar spine and prevent thoracic region extension. So when you have your lineman being driven up, the abs should be firing to offset hyperextension to prevent the lower back from going into spasm and causing a lot more problems. One of the other things is transfer force from the legs to the upper body. And I can illustrate this from going back to a conversation I had with Phil, training for him for World's Strongest Man. We trained him for 16 weeks, so this is how long this takes, and they still don't get it. Pull in your abs, do this. There's a lot of different coaching cues that you can use. He calls me up, he's like, I'm having trouble with the yoke walk, which is where you strap the car on you, you get up, run 80 feet with it, and it's like an 800, 900 pound car. He was doing 80 feet in about 37 seconds, which is slow, World's Strongest Man times. So I drove to Charleston and I watched his form, and he did everything that we told him not to do. He wasn't tightening through here, he wasn't making himself skinny, he wasn't tightening his lats. When I reminded him that, he went from 37 seconds to 17 seconds in one trip. Next, training the lats wrong. Oftentimes we don't focus on the lats the way that they're supposed to be designed to work. The lats really stabilize the pelvis. Yes, they do help in doing pull-ups, but a secondary job of the lats is actually to stabilize the pelvis. We don't focus enough on getting our football players to do pull-ups correctly. When you don't do that, the pelvis doesn't move correctly. We never get in a good extension with the lats, so they never fire 100% as much as they can. With that, you also end up, if you train it incorrectly, hamstring strains, adductor sprains, lower back, and shoulder problems. Again, one of the secondary or tertiary jobs of the lat is to stabilize the shoulder joint. And if we never train the lat correctly, it never does its job. Finally, the glutes. We train glutes by squatting, maybe by power cleaning. The problem is that's one dimension out of 3.